Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. It was a significant day for survivors of federal Indian hospitals, says the representative plaintiff of a class action lawsuit. This morning, the federal government signed a proposed settlement agreement to compensate class members more than $1 billion for abuse suffered at the segregated health facilities. Sav Jones has a roundup of what the agreement entails.
The settlement will provide individual compensation ranging from $10,000 to $200,000 to former patients who suffered abuse at federal Indian hospitals.
This settlement will not erase the pain. It will not bring back what was taken, but it does represent something that was long denied: responsibility.
The amount of compensation varies based on the level of abuse suffered against roughly 100,000 Indigenous survivors. First filed in 2018, the suit was certified a class action in 2020. 3 similar lawsuits were filed in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, but they were all combined under what is now called the Hardy case. From 1936 to 1981, the federal government operated 33 hospitals as tuberculosis treatment centers.
However, they quickly became a tool of segregation. Many Indigenous patients were forced to stay for months or even years, as I heard this morning, enduring mistreatment, neglect, and abuse. For many, these hospitals were the site of some of the most painful and personal experiences of their life. Memories that they rather forget, but they carry with them each and every day.
It took 5 years for the parties to negotiate the proposed settlement. It now awaits approval by the Federal Court of Canada, which will be considered on June 10th to 11th. Indian hospital survivor Anne Cecil Hardy is the court-appointed representative plaintiff. She started the claim because she wanted Canada to finally acknowledge what happened to her and many others.
I was just a child, 10 years old, when I was admitted to the Charles Council Hospital. I was admitted because I had TB and was supposed to be there to heal. But instead, I experienced fear, isolation, and trauma that has stayed with me for decades.
Hardy, who is Métis, says she felt alone while she experienced and witnessed sexual and other abuses against patients while held in the hospital.
I left the hospital physically, emotionally, and psychologically battered. The abuse I suffered and witnessed changed the entire course of my life.
An additional $150 million will go to supporting healing, reconciliation, and commemoration. $235.5 million will go to supporting research, education, and preservation of the facilities. Indigenous Services Canada will also receive $150 million to extend existing mental health supports to class members. Immediate family members of survivors who have passed are also eligible for compensation. Sav Jones, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
On Wednesday afternoon, a groundbreaking ceremony took place on the site of the future Mercury Care Home in Grassy Narrows First Nation in Northern Ontario. The deal to build the facility was made 5 years ago, following decades of activism by members and their supporters. APTN's Sierra Bettens was in the community for the ceremony and brings us more.
In July 2014, former Grassy Narrows chief and Treaty 3 Grand Chief Steve Fobister went on a hunger strike at Queen's Park in Toronto. He did it to draw attention to the devastating impact of mercury poisoning in his community.
He was a fighter for mercury justice. Despite his health, he went on a hunger strike on Parliament to get attention on behalf of the people.
In October 2018, Fobister died at 66 after a long battle with mercury poisoning complications. But his fight for justice lives on. On Wednesday, members of the Grassy Narrows First Nation and government officials gathered for the groundbreaking ceremony for a future Mercury Care Home in his name. His daughters, Emily and Sherry Fobister, were there to honor his memory.
On behalf of the Fobister family and the people of Grassy Narrows, who my dad worked his life to defend and fight for, We say Chimiquech for honoring my dad by naming the Mercury home after him.
In the 1960s and 70s, the Dryden paper mill dumped about 9 tons of mercury into the English Wabigoon River system, upstream of Grassy Narrows. Today, more than 90% of people in the community experience symptoms of mercury poisoning. The care facility will be home to 22 mercury patients and provide specialized treatment for community members. The federal government has committed $82 million to capital costs and $68.9 million to the operational costs of the care home. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Indigenous Services Minister Patty Haiju acknowledged what it took to get there.
This isn't the benevolence of the federal government sweeping in and saying, we'll do the right thing. This is generations of people fighting for this.
After the ceremony, the community gathered for drumming and a feast. Members, like former chief Raphael Fobister, shared how mercury poisoning has impacted their lives.
Because of mercury, my brain is damaged, but I still remember the old days. I still remember when I helped to develop the mercury, the position paper for the mercury compensation.
In September 2014, thousands rallied in Toronto, demanding member compensation, an end to industrial threats, and mercury remediation in Grassy Narrows. When asked if the federal government plans to compensate members, Haiju said that's Ontario's responsibility.
Actually, there's a Ontario legislation and mercury compensation board that's fully run, and Ontario is responsible for that compensation board. I did tell council and chief today that we would advocate with them that Ontario comes to the table.
Members like Carla Cocopanans spoke about the pain of being disconnected from family who are forced to relocate to urban centres for care.
They often share stories of loneliness and missing their families, friends, and loved ones. I will be happy when we can bring our elders home to be reunited with their families.
The anticipated completion date for the care facility is summer 2027. And when the doors open, some of those relatives will be welcomed home. Sierra Buttons, APTN National News, Grassy Narrows.
In Manitoba, an apology to the family of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron by the interim leader of the Progressive Conservatives. The former government initially refused to search a privately owned landfill just north of Winnipeg. This comes on the heels of potential remains being found last week. T.R. Wheatley has more.
The search inside the Prairie Green landfill for the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron continues while the RCMP and the province's chief medical examiner work to identify the possible remains that were found here. All the while, people in this province continue to process the information, including the former Manitoba government, who initially refused to search the landfill.
Our government erred. It's as simple as that.
In session, the interim Progressive Conservative leader Wayne Iwasco said his party acted without empathy and lost its way in providing closure to the families.
I offer today our unconditional apology to the families.
Rebecca Contois, Harris, Myron, and yet to be identified Buffalo woman were all brutally murdered by Jeremy Skibitsky in spring 2022. Last August, he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Court revealed Harris and Myron ended up in the Prairie Green. In 2023, a provincial election campaign for the PC government focused on political ads standing firm against the search, with former Premier Heather Stephenson saying it was too costly and too dangerous.
We will, as L. Harris requested, be better as a party.
That's my mom in there.
Morgan's youngest daughter, Elle Harris, gave a gut-wrenching speech the day after possible remains were found, boldly challenging the previous government, the city of Winnipeg and its police, along with naysaying Manitobans.
To every one of you that didn't believe in us, do better.
With the PC apology, Cambria Harris, Morgan's oldest, took to social media on Wednesday, talking about the emotional turmoil her family is still facing.
To the point where it made others comfortable to come out and spew full-on white supremacy and racist comments.
Even saying this latest move is the party wanting to save face.
Why are you apologizing publicly when you had a chance to mediate and meet with my family privately on numerous occasions? So unless your actions want to prove me otherwise, anything that you are saying right now is mere words. And that is all I have been served the last 2 years from all levels of government.
In December, after a 2-year fight by the families, the physical search began and is being led by the current NDP government. In session, Premier Wab Kinew taking the chance to also share words with the PCs.
The project of searching the landfill was always feasible, was always something that could have been undertaken by a government with compassion.
The PCs weren't the only ones to refuse to help to get the search going. The Winnipeg Police also said no and have not apologized. However, in a statement late last week, the acting police chief said, quote, "Our thoughts go out to the families who are awaiting word on their missing loved ones," unquote. Meanwhile, the results of the identity aren't expected until later this month. TR Wheatley, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thanks, TR. Time for a quick break, and then our Truth in Politics panel is here. Stick around. Welcome back. It's Thursday, and that means our Truth in Politics panel is here. This week, we're talking about the on-again, off-again trade tariffs between the U.S. and Canada. Jennifer Leywitz is the CEO of Pasqua Harbor Strategies, and Nigon Sinclair is the columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Jennifer, Nigon, thanks as always. Nigon, we'll start with you this week, and Donald Trump's tariffs are kicking in, and it looks like businesses in Canada and the U.S. are scrambling to figure out the full effects. How affected do you think Indigenous peoples in Canada will be?
When you have a group of people who are already paying way too much for basic groceries, for paying for hydro, for paying for things like home rentership, never mind all the other challenges that we face as the most impoverished people in the country, our communities will be hard hit by this, because it's not really just about the price of eggs or groceries. It's also about transport. It's about the fact that wages are not increasing. And then the reality that, let's say that you want to buy a car and now your car has gone up 25%. It's going to make a very difficult path forward for Indigenous peoples, who will be the most hit when the economy gets hit.
Jennifer, let's turn to your backyard here, and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, obviously the province, very natural resource-based economy, like many provinces and territories. Scott Moe saying basically all pipeline projects are pre-approved. Do you see this as having a positive or negative impact on First Nations peoples and rights?
I think in the grander scheme of things, I want to see the side of where I understand what he's trying to do. But at the same time, all I can think about is the Jobs and Growth Act and Stephen Harper and Idle No More and why we got here to begin with. And I know that conversation has shifted and changed so much in the last 10 years even. But at the same time, there are nations actively working at asserting their sovereignty and trying to build duty to consult in Saskatchewan. And I just saw this as an opportunity to bulldoze over that. And I'm a little bit disappointed, and I know there's people out there that are going to see the Premier is doing what's best for his province, but at the same time, we have those relationships with First Nation communities in Saskatchewan, and not only does duty to consult come into play, but also the consent aspect of it as well. And some of the chiefs that I work alongside didn't really know anything about this, so that's an issue right there.
Nigon, some premiers have threatened to turn out the lights on parts of the U.S. Doug Ford announcing today that Ontario is going to put a 25% surcharge on U.S.-bound electricity. Do you think this is the right move here?
Well, this is a great example of populism, a sort of Ontario Canadian populism against an American populism, which is protectionist, which is based in tariffs, and really America first. I mean, you couldn't ask for a kind of bigger sense of two ideologies that are quite uncompromising, quite at times unreasonable. And it was Doug Ford who said that we will not budge on tariffs. The United States made an offer as late as yesterday to reduce their tariffs from 25% to 10.5% on certain items. And what Doug Ford immediately said is, we're not going to budge on anything until all the tariffs are removed. So I'm not surprised he would make an extreme move like this. He was threatening to cut them off. Now it looks like a tariff, which is maybe that's reasonable. The reality is that there's a big burgeoning crisis that is going to hit a tipping point in a short while from now between the United States and Canada, in which there's going to have to be some side that will give 1 to 2 inches Hopefully it's not Canada, because we know that if it is Canada, it will be Indigenous peoples who are the most impacted by that if the tariffs stay on the U.S. side and are lowered on the Canadian side or changed on the Canadian side or something or other. The reality is that there's a big crisis coming, and someone's going to have to blink. And it's looking increasingly like Donald Trump is blinking because he just paused tariffs on Mexico.
Jennifer, what do you think that we can do to insulate our families from the cost of food going up and these types of things? How do we prepare?
I think that this is part of a conversation that needs to be looked at more as the future as well, and especially as First Nations start asserting autonomy over food sovereignty and food security. I think that right now, more than ever, we need to be bringing that conversation back to the forefront and making sure that it's not just rooted in the cultural ways of knowing around food sovereignty and why we had that way of life to begin with, but also to protect ourselves in exact times like this. When we are heavily dependent on grocery stores and the high cost of living, then unfortunately we get into that reality of how the United States making these decisions impact us greatly. So I think we're going to have to start thinking more in a collective way with our nations and with our own communities on how we can support one another. And that's another big piece right now, is almost shifting your mindset a little bit of how do we look after one another. And I get it, times are very tough. I know what that's like. You know, I've been through poverty, I've lived through it. I know what it's like to say it's very difficult to think about others in this time. But if we want to move forward in a way where we're not losing people are not overdosing and feeling that stress and going down that path of what those impacts look like, then now more than ever, we need to be thinking about one another.
Jennifer Degon, we're going to continue the tariff talk over on the podcast, including whether some First Nations leaders should be off to Vegas next week, but we'll leave it there for now. Thanks. Still to come, we'll tell you about a casting call for Cody Lightning's latest movie. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This stunning sunset was captured and sent in by Velma Samanshaw. This was her view from Chate, Alberta. I believe I got that right. Thanks, Velma. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, you can send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at your Friday weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, -1 in Charlottetown and Halifax. -9 with snow in Kuujjuaq, flurries and 1 below in Nain. +1 with snow in Montreal, 8 below and flurries in Val-d'Or. -4 in Sault Ste. Marie, +1 in Ottawa. -6 in Thunder Bay, 8 below with snow in Sioux Lookout. -10 in God's Lake, 9 below in Norway House. -5 in sunny skies in Winnipeg, -2 with snow in Dauphin. 2 above in Regina, Saskatoon, and North Battleford. -9 in Uranium City, +6 in Meadow Lake. In northern Alberta, +2 in High Level, snow, and -9 for Fort Chipewyan. 8 above in Edmonton and Medicine Hat, 10 in Lethbridge. 10 in Vancouver, 12 for Kamloops. 9 in Prince George and Smithers, 5 in Dease Lake. -9 in Old Crow, 0 in Whitehorse. -17 in Yellowknife and Norman Wells. -23 in Sax Harbor, 26 below in Paulatuck. -22 with snow in Chesterfield, Whale Cove and Arviette. 23 below in Resolute, 19 below in Iqaluit. Cree actor, writer, and director Cody Lightning is getting ready to film his latest movie. It's called Smudge the Blades, and until Friday, his team is looking for Edmonton area hockey players to be part of his film. Chris Stewart has more.
Oh, my boy. I told you I wasn't even lying. They're making a movie on me. Look. I'm Cody Lightning, Smoke Signals. I was in it. I don't know where I would be without that movie.
Cody Lightning has been starring in, writing, and directing movies since 1993. The 39-year-old released the sequel to his big hit, Smoke Signals, last year, called Hey Victor. And now he's prepping to shoot from March to April in and around Edmonton, nearby Enoch Cree Nation, Wetaskiwin, and Musqueam. The game will be very much a part of the movie, with experienced players and some pros taking part.
Pretty much based off of personal life stories and coaching experiences. It is fictionalized, but from the certain things that I went through, experienced, I kind of spliced some stuff together with my writing partner, Sam Miller, and we wrote an amazing hockey script.
He says it will be both funny and dark, a dramedy, and will feature authentic hockey.
When you really dig deep into these characters that I have in here, you're going to see they have very unique individual backstories that aren't the most beautiful. And so, yeah, we're going to hit you with some gut-wrenching laughs and some really heartfelt, throat-clenching tears as well.
And if you are between 18 and 25 and near Edmonton, until Friday, you can contact his people to maybe get a shot to be in the movie. But he says you have to be filthy at hockey. He says there have been 4,000 submissions so far.
But you can reach out to smudgetheblades@gmail.com or look at our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. You just have to be a really deadly hockey player.
He hopes to have the movie ready for award nominations in early 2026. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Looking forward to that. Hey, Victor was the funniest movie of 2024. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Fraser Needham is standing by with a preview of tonight's Nation to Nation.
Coming up in a few minutes, a proposed settlement agreement for Indigenous people who suffered abuse while patients at what were then known as Indian hospitals was announced in Ottawa today. We talked to one of the lawyers who represented class action litigants. Pam Palmer of Toronto Metropolitan University is also here to talk about the Trump tariffs, Liberal leadership race, and where Indigenous people fit in. And NDP MP Charlie Angus also drops by to talk about his campaign to boycott American goods in response to Donald Trump's threats against Canada. All this ahead on Nation to Nation.
Pam and Charlie Angus in one show. Thanks, Fraser. Two women who have played a significant role in shaping APTN were honored with a prestigious award for their essential work in preserving Indigenous stories nationwide. Senator Andrew Cardozo presented King Charles III coronation medals to them recently. On February 28th, the Senate of Canada recognized APTN CEO Monica Ely. Ely has served as CEO of APTN since December 2019 and has been dedicated to ensuring Indigenous representation, languages, and stories are prominent in media across Turtle Island. APTN's Vice Chair, Jennifer David, also received a coronation medal for her pivotal role in founding APTN as the first Director of Communications, as well as her continued work in truth and reconciliation. The medals honor individuals who have made significant contributions to Canada or achieved exceptional success internationally. Congrats to both of them. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Stick around, Fraser is up next with Nation to Nation. We'll see you back here tomorrow.